everyone. It's Friday night, 7 p.m., which means it's time for another chat with one of our experts that know a lot about celiac disease, especially in one specific area. So tonight we're going to be joined with Kristin Osborne from the Prioritize group. She is a disability advocate, not only for kids with food allergies, but also ADHD, autism, all those other categories. But I met her at the Food Allergy Bloggers Conference a couple of years ago. And so she's my go-to whenever I have questions about IEPs and 504s. And we're going to be joining with her right now. It does its thing.
Hello.
Hi, Kristin. It's so good to see your face.
It's nice to see your face, too, even if it is virtually.
I know, right?
Here's the world we live in.
I know. My husband's a teacher, and we're all like, okay, so how is this going to happen next year, and what's it going to look like? And nobody quite has an answer yet, but we'll figure it out.
They don't. I feel like teachers are one of the most resilient people I know. My mom's a teacher. My aunt was a principal. So they always can find a way and make a way. So kudos. Thank you to your husband for teaching.
And he's a middle school teacher.
Oh, man.
8th graders.
That's a double whammy. I have an 8th grader, so I know.
I know. That's why I made sure to say that, because I'm like, you've got the older boys, so you know what that stage is.
Oh, yes. Yes, I do. But, life is changing. Life is different. And, as, a parent to a child with multiple food allergies, or even as someone with celiac, that life has its ebbs and flows and things change. And we're pretty good at navigating, a little chaos.
Right. Well, for those who are just joining us, it's Kristin Osborne, and her webpage is called the Prioritize Group, and you can find her on Facebook and here on Instagram. Actually, I think on Facebook it's your name.
Yeah, you can search the Prioritize Group and it should come up.
Yep. All right. Cool. So, give us a little bit about your background, like how you kind of came to be this advocate in this specific realm.
Well, I'm married. I live in Virginia, and I have 3 children, boys, with multiple life-threatening food allergies. So we avoid things like wheat, dairy, egg, peanut, tree nut, shellfish. My husband's allergic to fish. And so out of the top 8, we're not allergic to soy. So soy's our saving grace, if there actually really is one.
Right.
But my older son is 18, and he was diagnosed when he was 2. So we've navigated this kind of lifestyle for the last 16 years. And then additionally, I have my husband and I have a 14-year-old and then an 8-year-old. And they all have different food allergies. So parents, I really feel for you during this time of quarantine when you are trying to find safe and delicious foods to make sure that your children don't eat everything out of your refrigerator and your freezer, because I do this all the time and I'm still struggling.
I will say I didn't have no children, but I have a husband, and I'm like, I feel like I'm going to the store just a little bit more. I'm trying to make it every 2 weeks, but sometimes I'm like, well, that didn't last the way I thought it was going to.
No,
and my husband can't. They say it's not an allergy, but he definitely reacts. So he went through the testing, like, you didn't react as much, so we're going to say you're not allergic to shellfish. She's like, well, I had hives, so I'm not going to eat it. So, yeah. So we can't do shellfish or pork in our house. So it's, those are a little bit easier to stay away from. It's not hidden as many things. But sometimes, though, like with lard, it'll be in things that you wouldn't expect.
Really?
From pork. Yeah, like biscuits, like if you have like...
yeah.
So, yeah. Hi, Ashley. Ashley, celiac in S6. She lives in Canada. So she's joining us. So, and then, so that's the food allergies. Now, how did you get into disability? Maybe you already mentioned this and I missed it, but like the disability side of things.
Well, in addition to multiple life-threatening food allergies, I have one son that has that's on the spectrum. He's twice exceptional. Also, I have another son who has ADHD. So a lot of times I was banging my head against the wall trying to find or figure out how to best advocate for my children in school. And a lot of times I found that it was a frustrating experience because teachers wanted to help and some didn't, some did, but I couldn't figure out how to help him. And I received my training through a program. It's Partners in Policymaking. They have them in each state. And it's an intensive 10-month course where we learn about advocacy and disability rights and the history of disability rights in this country and how to effectively advocate for not only ourselves, but everyone else in our community. So that was an eye-opening experience because we, in our family, typically kind of navigate, food allergies. And that was interesting to kind of talk about food allergies in a community where most people really weren't familiar or may not see it as a quote-unquote disability.
Right. Because I think we don't want to use that word sometimes. Like, no, I'm able to do things. Don't judge me. But, like, we need to remember that sometimes these terms are specific words because they come with specific rights. And so we need to not be afraid to say, this is a disability. I'm not disabled, but this, it affects my life.
Right.
So one of the main reasons I wanted to have you on is you're really kind of, in my opinion, one of the best experts about 504s and all that stuff.
Oh,
but first, before we talk about 504s, explain how an IEP and a 504 are two completely different things.
They are. They're cousins, but that's about it.
Right.
And I get this question a lot. An IEP is basically an individualized education plan. And it's used for students in public schools who have disabilities or something that might impact their ability to learn in the classroom. So it falls under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. So it's a legally binding document. And there are certain qualifications that would determine a student eligible. So there's a process you would go through of eligibility. And it kind of you have to tick off these certain qualifications. If a student's found eligible, then this plan, IEP, is created. And it's different from a 504 plan because the IEP will have goals. And it might include some special education changes to the curriculum. So if the student needs to better understand how, if they're in first grade and grade level, they need to learn how to count to 100. And they're not at that level. Maybe they can only count to 20. There's going to be some goals created with, step-by-step instructions on how to help that child reach that goal or that benchmark by a certain time. There are also accommodations in an IEP. There are also services.
Like for example, because my husband's a teacher, like an accommodation in an IEP would be like they get extra time to take a test, correct? That's in an IEP.
Yes. Yeah. I've helped parents write accommodations that are related to food allergies and an IEP as well. But there might be some other services like OT or PT. So there's some physical therapy, some speech therapy, and how that works out and, how many hours they might receive that per week. That's really the big difference between the two. I mean, obviously, legally, the difference is one falls under IDEA and the other one falls under Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. That's the 504 plan. So
Hey, Stephanie.
Hey,
Stephanie just joined. I'm like, hey, Stephanie.
Hello, Stephanie. They're similar, but very different. And I think a lot of times we as parents kind of confuse the two because it's hard to understand what our child would qualify for. Because if you have a child that has food allergies and they're on the spectrum and maybe they need some services at school, like let's talk about a child with ADHD. Maybe they're not reaching their current grade level of what they should be doing. So if they are failing or they're falling grossly behind, the IEP is going to have these goals that are set up to kind of help with that. And typically students are taken out either with a special education teacher or someone's going to come in the classroom and kind of help with that particular plan. But the student can also have food allergies. So you think, well, okay, how does that work? So in that IEP, there's an accommodation section, and we're going to list all the things that the student needs to keep them safe, and included in activities at school, whether it's in the classroom, in the cafeteria, after school, that sort of thing.
Gotcha. So I think you answered my first question. Sorry, I wrote, because we did a little bit of chatting and I wrote down our list. So who does a 504 help?
So a 504 helps many students who need specific accommodations to learn in school. So particularly it might be a student with ADHD. It might be a student who needs additional time for a class. It could even be a student who broke their leg and needs accommodations to navigate school, whether that's using crutches or a wheelchair. Maybe they need to leave class a little bit early, or they can arrive class a little bit later. You know, that legally binding document seals that everyone in the school knows and understands what the needs of that individual child are or is, and the child won't get in trouble. So let's say your student may have asthma and they miss a lot of school because of it. Instead of being penalized for having asthma, there's, accommodations that could say, if little Johnny returns to school and he's been away for asthma so many days, then he has this amount of time to turn in work, as opposed to expected to, take a test the day he returns back to school.
Like, I know it was quite a few years ago, but like my husband had a student with Crohn's disease, and then in middle school, like, you only get so many passes, but in his 504, like, no, he gets to go use the bathroom whenever he wants. And I kind of think like IEP is like what the kid learns, and the 504 is like the environment and the kid learns. And if I were to kind of, at least that's how I think of it in my head. Am I kind of right?
Kind of. It's a little different. I mean, with the IEP, some students may need services that aren't provided, and they can only get these services through their IEP. So it's a little different. I mean, the 504 plan really is very black and white, and that's why I suggest, any child that is in a school setting that can or would like to find out if they're eligible to qualify, because the plan is black and white and helps the principals, the teachers, everyone in the school, custodians, will know exactly what the needs of this child is, and they can better accommodate him or her and keep them safe from whatever it is that they're needing. I know I talked about my son who's in 8th grade, and he transitioned from elementary school to middle school, and now he's transitioning from middle school to high school. So the needs of an elementary student are a little different than the needs of a middle school student, and obviously middle school and high school is a little different. So we go in and we talk about his 504 at the beginning of every year. We talk about, we go over each specific accommodation. Some of the things that I have in the 504 specifically state that we go over the 504 before the beginning of the school year. And we talk about everything individually, and anyone who basically has any contact, touch, custodians, guidance counselors, sports teams, partners, anything like that, they're involved in this meeting as well. And when we go line by line over his accommodations, everyone kind of is sitting down and truly listens to hear what will keep him safe. So I did the same thing when my oldest was in high school, and I do the same thing when my youngest, he's in 2nd grade going to 3rd. So it definitely is not just for parents whose children have celiac or food allergies or ADHD. There's a host of different things that may qualify your child for a 504 plan.
So when should a parent decide to get one? Like how do you start that process?
Well, you should, if you would like to get one for your child, I always say get one as soon as possible. The process starts, and I always suggest the process starting by having a written letter and giving that to your principal in addition to the 504 coordinator. So every school should have a coordinator, and each school district should have a district-wide coordinator, to say the least. And a lot of times I've heard in rural areas, maybe they don't have that. And it's not always accurate, because then there always needs to be someone to kind of navigate and be the point of contact in each school. So you want to make sure that you ask for a evaluation meeting. And it's always important to do it in writing. And from that point, when they will schedule the meeting, and then you kind of go through the motions of determining whether your child's eligible.
Gotcha. I think sometimes I've had parents sound like, oh, I don't want to be a bother, or, or they'll think, because like I have a degree in education, and I did my student teaching in third grade, and there were some kids that definitely probably qualified for some type of services, but the parents were like, oh, I don't want to label my child or whatever. And like I try to tell people, I'm like, no, but this isn't about labeling your child. This is about making sure they get the best appropriate education, and there's no hindrance to them achieving a great education when they're there. So I always...
You're exactly right. It's not about hindering, or labeling the child. I always look at it as a blueprint that everyone sees, that everyone knows how to follow and what to do. Because a lot of times schools have principals, they come, they go. Teachers come, they go throughout the year. And if you had a principal that truly was there, helping the student, and then maybe another one who isn't quite familiar with the protocols that were in place and decides, I don't really want to do that, you have you don't have a leg to stand on if there isn't anything there that's legally binding. So I always suggest having it in place, whether or not you think you need it, because it's important that everyone's on the same page. And first, it's your child's first kind of dip. They're dipping their toe in self-advocacy, which is extremely important. Whether it's in kindergarten or fifth grade or high school, your child is going to self-advocate for themselves after they're out of your house. And as parents, it's our job to kind of help them with that. And that's the first step in being able to do that. Not only, is the child able to communicate what his needs are. No, I can't eat that peanut. I'm allergic to it. Or, this is what I need in order to kind of help myself. That 504 plan's that blueprint, and it's in black and white. It's legally binding. And everyone knows what's supposed to happen when it's written down. Whether that's actually done, that's a whole different story.
Right. And I think it's interesting. I love that word about using a blueprint. I'm like, it's just like a map. Like every kid is different, and this is how they get from point A to point B, and that's fine. And I think too, like you talked about principals coming and going. I know the district that my husband works in, again, as a middle school teacher, like they're like all kindergarten building, then 1 through 4, 5 and 6, 7, 8, and he's in the 7, 8 building. Anyway, like so many times one of his coworkers said that they were like, I don't want to say getting in trouble, but like the kids would be in elementary school and the parents would be like, oh, they don't need a 504 because all these teachers know my kid. And the principal, like, yeah, that's great in elementary school. But then when you transition to a whole new building, like they're all trying to catch up, And so like somebody was like, why are these middle school teachers writing so many 504s? Like, why do you keep pressing this? I'm like, well, because it wasn't done in elementary school because people thought they didn't need it. So, yeah. And again, I always try to tell people, like, it's not like we're trying to start a fight or anything. Again, it's a conversation, and it's on both sides. Like the school also knows what the parent agrees to do. Like, it's it's a communication on paper, basically. Like, and you hold each other accountable.
It is. You were so right about kids getting to middle school and maybe not having the 504 plan and then all of a sudden struggling a little bit or needing these accommodations in middle school. And it's kind of a shock, a culture shock for the student and for the parent. So that's why I always suggest starting it out in elementary school and then tweaking it as you need to in middle school and then high school.
Yeah. And for those who are just joining us, we're talking with Kristin Osborne. She's a disability advocate, and her kids have food allergies. And so we're talking about 504 plans and how they're different than IEPs. And if you have any questions, please put them in the comments below and we'll try to get to them. So what do you do if the school says, no, we're not going to do an F504 for you? And you would qualify, and you should qualify, but they're like, oh, no, we're not going to do it.
Well, I always joke with parents and I say, listen, I really like to work with schools. I really feel like that bond of communicating effectively is so important. And I come with the honey, and the honey doesn't work. We finish it with a hot sauce. I mean, that's because
you were definitely a honey. Like, you were one of the sweetest people I know. But I can so imagine too, like, because you are such a great advocate. Be like, okay, listen.
Oh, the hot sauce comes out. Yes, we were in a meeting, and one of the dads says, "Bring the hot sauce out, Kristin. Bring the hot sauce." I thought, oh wow, okay. But let's say, for instance, you did everything. You wrote your letter. You emailed it to the principal. You emailed it to the school 504 coordinator. And they said, we don't really think that your child qualifies for a 504 plan. And then you say, well, he or she needs to be evaluated. So I'd like to request a meeting for evaluation. And if they're adamant about we don't want to do it, then you say, well, I'd like to you can go and talk to the next level. That would be the district-wide 504 coordinator, hopefully. And schedule a meeting between you. Am I still here?
Yeah, you're still here. You buffered for just a second. So.
Okay. They can schedule a meeting between you and the principal and that sort of thing. Typically, once you start bringing in district-wide assistance or finding that district-wide assistance, and you typically get the evaluation meeting. If not, then you go above. And there's the Office of Civil Rights for help and assistance on all kinds of these things. So if you can't start at that kind of level of the principal, then move on to district, and then move on. I was called Office of Civil Rights. So
would an ISD be beneficial? Because I know my husband's uncle, his wife was a special ed coordinator for the ISD. Do they have at least in Michigan, we have ISDs, intermediate school districts, that's kind of connected to the other. So would you suggest if your district is just not getting it, would the ISD be a good place to go to?
Absolutely. I mean, they're called something different in each district. I know for us, our 504 department and our special ed department are two separate entities. Mm-hmm. But yes, that's definitely, they could at least find the person that you need to contact. If for some reason you're not getting anywhere with the principal or the guidance counselor at their school, that's definitely a good step to help find someone that really can navigate you in a better direction.
Gotcha. So could you share, obviously there's HIPAA, but could you, for parents that are listening and be like, I don't even know what for my celiac child, we'd even put in a 504. Could you share some of the things, especially the food allergy related stuff for your boys that are in their 504s? So
I think first it always should be a conversation with the child, depending on age. Mm-hmm. I know when my kids were younger, my husband and I kind of developed everything together, and then over the years tweaked it due to mishaps or lack of communication in schools. But some of the things that we have, I'll use my 8th grader, is that he would prefer to sit not directly next to anyone in the cafeteria. So there's an accommodation that says an adult will come in and clean a table with a clean solution and clean cloth. And then he can sit down, and he prefers to have an empty seat on either side of him, but that's his preference. My younger son may not. My older son didn't. So it's really kind of what the child would think is safe, because I know a lot of parents would prefer their child to sit at a peanut-free table or a table that was specifically for other children, and if that's what the comfort level is, that's what the comfort level is. But I know for other students I've written that have celiac, we've had the school purchase a separate microwave so that the student could reheat a hot lunch from home in the microwave. It was only there for them, or the parent provided it, what have you. And no one was permitted to use that particular microwave because it was important that this child had no cross contact or anything like that. And that was an example. Also, having the ability to go to the bathroom, like you mentioned earlier with Crohn's, anytime, not being questioned why, when, how, long, how long, the ability to have absences and then make up the work that's missing at a later date. Or also make sure that, I know for my son that's in 8th grade, he has a wheat allergy, so it's a little different than celiac. But he has a wheat allergy, a dairy allergy, an egg allergy, tree nuts, and then peanuts. He also has the ability to complete his work 50%. So if he was gone for 3 days or 3 classes, he has the ability to kind of turn it in a class or 2 later. And the teachers are really nice when working with him about that, and understanding that, he has times where he doesn't come to school due to either an anaphylactic reaction, or he may be in school and have a reaction that isn't anaphylactic, but definitely was a body system, and we took him home. So, anywho, but he has a lot of different things that kind of navigate food allergies, but mostly for him, it's the classroom. He doesn't have any food in the class. I know a lot of people are talking about what will school look like in August or September.
Yeah, and they're talking about no cafeterias and everybody eat in the classroom. But I did see, did you see the CDC guidelines? They specifically mentioned food allergies, which I was like, way to go, CDC. I'm proud of that.
They are. They have a great allergy guidelines, too, that if you have time and you to read through it, you should.
Right.
But
I think it's 45 pages. Well, I mean,
it's
the whole school section's not 45 pages, but like the reopening the country, it's like 45 pages. I'm like, oh dear Lord, no.
Yes, it's extensive. It's extensive, but immediately I think, oh, okay, well, if lunch will happen in the cafeteria or happen in the classroom, it won't happen in my son's class because he has an accommodation that says there's no food in his classroom at all.
Right.
And that's because multiple times he's had reactions in the class. He was taken via ambulance a couple of times from school. So, yeah. And I think Stephanie said that the CDC changed it after several different allergy groups brought it to their attention, which, of course, there's power in advocacy and power in numbers. So that's why I love this community. But
me too.
But going back to his accommodations, it's a no food in the classroom kind of accommodation. My son's school has breakfast in the classroom, so they allow his middle school was just amazing in helping him and really cared about his safety. And from day one, they chose to make sure that all the 6th graders, when he was in 6th grade, would eat breakfast in the cafeteria as opposed to the classroom. And then 7th grade, the entire 7th grade would do it. And then in 8th grade, the entire 8th grade would do it. So they were really good about being able to kind of make sure his needs were kind of being met. But let's see, some of the other accommodations that he has are...
Like when he was little, did he have like art supply, like because Play-Doh has wheat in it and stuff like that?
Oh, yes. I have made gluten-free Play-Doh a lot. And made it from preschool to elementary school. But yes, there's no Play-Doh. We also didn't have containers in the classroom that maybe... Have you seen those really big... I I think they're called cheese balls that you can get a big container.
Yeah, like the
this.
Utz. Yeah, like the Utz cheese balls. Yeah, none of those in the classroom.
None of those in the classroom.
Cheese powder everywhere.
Oh,
It'd be deadly for a dairy allergy kid.
Yes, it's crazy.
Horrible.
It's crazy. So, and then any time the teacher wanted to have a party or give some kind of treat, there's an accommodation that says that I need to read the label or the nurse can read the label. So, and before he's given it, because I think one time in elementary school I walked in and there was a substitute and she was just handing out goldfish and my eyes were bugging out. What are you doing? Oh, no, we don't do that.
Hi, Dave Bondi. He's one of our local news anchors. I'm like, he's never. Of course, my dog just try to knock over my stuff. I don't think Dave has kids. Well, Dave has kids, but I don't think they have any dietary restrictions. Although I could be wrong. But so hi, Dave.
Hi, Dave.
Yeah. So sorry, my dog just came in from outside and she's like, "Mom, pet me." I'm like,
it's okay.
"Go away!" And she's like trying to nuzzle her head by the chair between the table where I have my stand set up. Yeah, I think those are pretty much all the questions I have and that we talked about beforehand. Like, any other tips and guidance on parents about getting a 504 for their child and concerns?
Yeah, I know. I briefly talked about kind of how to get a 504. So once you're found eligible, there will be a 504 team, and the team consists of sometimes the principal, the assistant principal, the guidance counselor, a teacher, and then someone else in the meeting. You'll get, ahead of time, you should get a document that shows you who's coming to the meeting, your rights, and when you get there, come with your accommodation list all together. And I always say, make sure that when you put all these different accommodations together, you kind of have your ones that are non-negotiable. I mean, there's some things that are just non-negotiable. And anything can be communicated and everyone can reach a happy medium. But it takes time. It takes time. There was a parent I worked with in our city who wanted the bus driver to be trained to administer epinephrine to her child. And it took several months, but between going back and forth, we actually changed the guidelines. So by helping her, we were able to help the entire city and change the guidelines so that all the bus drivers were trained to administer epinephrine.
Like they should be. I don't know why that should even be a thing to fight about.
Your guess is as good as mine.
Oh, man.
But each 504 plan is individualized to each student, and the accommodations are individualized. You may have friends or that have students, and their plans are similar, but you definitely don't want to have the same plan because what might work for my child might not work for someone else's. And like I said, you know, with my 8th grader going to high school, it's important that he's involved in this, and he's the one that says, listen, I'm not really comfortable with that, or I don't think I need that accommodation anymore. So I'm hopefully empowering him to do this, so I don't do it anymore. That's scary.
Yeah,
Mom.
Stephanie and I talked about that the other night when we had our chat together, and she talked about, like, by high school, like, she expects Teal Kid to be running the show, because after high school, he's gonna have to run the show. And
absolutely.
And at one point, she brought something up, and he was like, "Mom, do you even remember what high school is like?" And she's like, "Oh, apparently I don't remember." You know, like he's like, "We don't do that in high school. Like, what were you thinking?" You know?
Us moms were so lame.
I know, but it's just funny.
Aww.
I can't think of anything. Oh, so I will ask this question. This is something I heard from somebody here in Michigan. Is it true that if you don't have a 504, like when you graduate from high school, you can't have one in college? Do you know much about 504s in college?
Well, technically there isn't a 504 in college.
I didn't think so. And I was like, okay.
So basically when my oldest son went to college this year, and you take your 504 plan, you go walk down to the special ed office, and you talk with them about what your needs are. These are my needs. And 99.9% of the time, they take that exact 504 plan and duplicate it into a plan for college. You take that plan, you have it, and you give it to all your teachers at the beginning of each semester and say, here, I can turn my work in late. Thanks. Bye. So, but yes, it's different. There isn't a 504 plan for college. You take the one that maybe you had in elementary school and kind of work on that plan with a special ed department and give it to your teachers.
Because somebody was saying, like, if you don't already have, like, a college isn't going to accommodate you if you didn't already have accommodations before you graduated, was something someone told me.
Well, I mean, things change. I mean, you could develop an allergy at any time. You could be diagnosed with ADD as an adult. So
Right. Yeah.
Things change.
Right. That's what I thought. I was like, huh. But again, like, you're the expert, not me. So that's why I made sure to ask you. So
Thank you. Yeah.
Gosh, I can't think of anything else. It's Friday.
Well, it's a lot to kind of put into a compact time, but, you know, I always tell parents, do your research, look up information, ask for help, you know, make sure that you find someone to kind of hold your hand, walk you through the process, because it can be a little scary, and make sure that you know your stuff. I mean, we're here as an advocate. I'm basically supposed to be here to know the law and what happens and how to navigate it to better help students. But, you know, as a parent, you don't have time to do all that. So find someone that can help you, tap into your local resources, and make sure that you have, you know, a small army with you when you walk into a meeting.
Now, you said do research. Are there websites or organizations that you would highly recommend people go to for well-researched resources?
Well, depending on what the disability is, you know, there are different. There's ADHD. My brain just left me. ADHD. There are different resources. Each disability has a kind of a branch. We have, you know, FACT and FAIR and kids with food allergies and all these great resources. But find some, ask for help. And I help with parents who kind of need some help navigating that conversation with the school, like holding their hand and walking with them through the whole process. But definitely get some help. And I wanted to point this out. I know a lot of times we hear about negative connotations with schools or negative connotations with working with administrators, but that isn't always the case. And you can have a good relationship with a school that empowers your child and a partnership between the two to kind of help create a good education. And I think a lot of times we hear bad things and, you know, bad things may happen. I've had bad things happen before, but at the end of the day, it's what's important for the child. So.
And I think that's good to point out, like, because, you know, squeaky wheel gets the grease. So we're going to probably hear about the things that go wrong. Nobody's jumping up and down and telling the whole world about how great their school accommodated their 504 plan, because there are no problems. There's nothing to talk about. So, and I think, like, I like to think that my husband's school is pretty good at it. But actually, he was even telling me today, he's like, he put it in his phone. He's like, I have an IEP meeting next week. So, like, he's been great about, at least I can speak for my husband. He's great about making sure he accommodates, and he likes to make sure that so his building, the classrooms district-wide are no peanuts, no tree nuts. That's a district-wide rule. And, like, sometimes he'll catch a staff member, like, with taking something, and he'll be like, did you forget? Like, how did you forget? No, you can't have this. And, like, well, but, and it's like, no buts. Like, you need to understand. And I think it's because of me having celiac disease and knowing people like you and Stephanie and others and Keely, whose kids have food allergies. And he's like, he realizes just how serious this is. So I want people to know there are teachers that really are gung-ho about doing everything they can for your kid.
They are, and I just want to give them a hug. I cried. At our when school ended, because by far this middle school experience with his teachers and staff was just out of this world. And if I could give them $1 million, I would. They all were above and beyond in making sure that when he had an allergic reaction, they were immediate in calling for help and 911 and communicating with me. And they really, really care about him. And I know when he leaves next year, they're all going to miss him. I asked if possibly they could move on to high school with him, but I was told no. But we definitely need more teachers, recognizing the teachers who are out there doing, everything they can to keep our kids safe, because we, as a parent, we truly appreciate it. We truly appreciate it. And kudos to your husband for all the work that he does day in and day out.
Oh, thanks.
It's not easy being a teacher.
Yeah. One of my favorite stories about him is, especially for they always, I don't want to say sick, but they always give him the autistic kids because they know how well he does with them. And so, he's got this thing, he can tell when a kid just needs a break. And so he has slips already made up, and it's go read poster XYZ in this hallway and then come back. And it was funny because it was almost the whole year before kids are you doing this just so I don't have a meltdown? He's yep. And the kid's okay.
Right. Okay.
And it's just a simple modification that Brad came up with, and you just do what's best for the kid. And actually, that's the one thing that when he was doing his student teaching, that I wish I could tell every teacher. His mentor said, "You teach the student, not the subject." That's the goal. And so again, in a 504 plan, if parents are hesitant, it helps the teacher teach your child, because they're not there just to teach a subject and go home. They're there to help your child become who they can be. And that's why having a 504 plan, if you have food allergies or celiac disease, is important.
Yeah, it's definitely there. It's that blueprint where everyone can see exactly what the student needs. The parents know, the administrators know. And at the end of the day, it's important because, we all want our children to come home safely.
Right. And I've subbed in his school, and stuff like that is in a sub packet in every classroom, because there are substitute teachers and they need to know they can't bring something into the classroom, or if something happens, what to do. So,
absolutely.
You may trust your teacher, and that's great, but there are other people that come into the school building just to we just want to do what's best for our kids all the time.
Absolutely. We just want the best. And we I find teachers really appreciate knowing what they should do and what they shouldn't. I know a lot of teachers will, my son's band teacher will text me sometimes and say, "I'm out today, and I told the sub exactly what needs to happen. And I told the nurse just to be aware if there's anything that goes on." That kind of behavior that your husband does, and my son's teachers, I just want to give him a hug and $1 million and say thank you.
We'll take the $1 million. We will.
Well, if I get it, I will share.
No, it's okay. I'm Mama needs a new floor in her living room. But that's okay.
Sharing is caring.
That's right. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time today, and hope you all are doing well there in Virginia, right? Yeah. Yep. I always forget when it comes to Virginia or West Virginia or South or North Carolina, I'm is one, I can't remember the word before it.
I'm in the part of the state that's by the beach, and I can't go to the beach. But now I think we officially can, but I'm not going. So, anywho, but thank you, Mark. I really appreciate you having me, and thank you. Kudos to you for all of your work you've done this week. All of your videos were very informative, and I know your audience really appreciated it.
And next week, we're talking to Karen Joseph. We'll be talking about type 1 diabetes. Awesome. And then we'll be talking with Erica. I saw her chime in. We'll be talking to her about some stuff. And then, not sure if you're familiar with Tasty Meditations, Jessica Hansen. She has thyroid disorder. She has Graves' disease.
Okay.
So we're going to be talking about celiac and thyroid and how they connect. So
hand in hand.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, sweetheart. It's so good to talk to you. Have a great night.
Bye.
Right, bye. Thank you for everyone who joined in. And Erica, if you're still here, hi, honey. We look forward to talking to you next Friday. And so we will not have another video until next Tuesday because it's Memorial Day weekend. So everyone enjoy the holiday. And we will catch you Tuesday, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll be talking to Karen Joseph about celiac disease and type 1 diabetes together. Thanks so much. Have a good night. Bye.